He stayed that way for a few minutes. Opening his eyes, he gazed up at the ceiling. He noticed the detail. It was nothing fancy, not quite what he expected, even though he didn't know what to expect. He saw only two types of lights, both hanging from white, lengthy cables. The first was cylindrical, with an opening at the end where he could see the light bulb. The other had a half-spherical design that covered the entire bulb, which still managed to radiate surprisingly bright light. For every 3 sets of parallel lights, there was a horizontal pillar, which sat at about a 30-degree angle, separating the lights. It was a sort of crimson red, and it sat at about a meter in length, stretching all the way to the either side of the building in its width. There were a bunch of white structural poles that made up the rest of the ceiling design. That's pretty bland for such an internationally esteemed airport, he thought. He had no interest in the design of the airport. He was merely trying to kill time, and maybe more importantly, trying not to let his mind run wild thinking about what might potentially await him on the other end of this trip. The PA system was readied for an announcement.
Good evening, passengers. This is the pre-boarding announcement for Flight QR740 to Doha. We are now inviting those passengers with small children and any passengers requiring special assistance to begin boarding at this time. Please have your boarding pass and identification ready. Regular boarding will begin in approximately 15 minutes. Thank you.
As everybody at gate 152 began to shuffle themselves towards the boarding counter, TJ remained seated. A few other passengers stayed in their seats, too. TJ took a moment to people watch. He noticed one guy in particular, wearing a navy blue, pinstripe suit. Something about him caught TJ's attention. He had a phone in his hand, and the only time his eyes weren't on the phone was when he was moving forward. He had a wireless Bluetooth headset in his ear. He appeared to be a businessman of sorts. An LA Times paper, open to the business section, was lying on the guy's carry-on bag beside him. There was something about his demeanor that was a bit off, though. TJ kept watching him. The man was older looking, perhaps in his late 40s or early 50s. TJ could clearly see this man steadily making his way to the front of the line. A little nudge here, a subtle shove there, and the man in the navy blue, pinstriped suit was at the front of the line. Needless to say, his not-so-discreet expedition included knocking down a little kid's candy bar. To top it all off, his interaction with the gentleman checking the boarding passes had no greeting, no thank you, and no acknowledgement there was a person in front of him. Annoyed by the actions of the man in the navy blue, pinstriped suit, TJ rolled his eyes and shook his head as he stood up to start heading to the back of the line.
You saw that too, huh?
The comment came from the girl sitting to his right. He had noticed her earlier. She had apologized to him when her bag hit his leg as she was sitting down.
Saw what?
TJ replied.
The jerk old man in the suit,
She said in a forceful tone.
Don't you just hate it when people who think they are important think they can do what they want when they want? It's so annoying.
Yeah.
For a moment he had forgotten about the actual incident, since he was taken aback by this random girl, passionately going off at a guy who wasn't even there anymore.
Sorry.
She apologized.
It just annoys me sometimes, and I see it so often at airports.
It's cool, I get what you're saying.
He really did. His football achievements had allowed him to encounter schools from all ends of the economic spectrum. The wealthier private schools often had the best teams, since they could afford the best athletes, sports scholarships, and TJ could recall on several occasions where the wealthy parents were treating others, who weren't from the same circles, as though they were less than. Many of the kids would do the same. He had so many negative experiences with spoiled rich kids, that to him they were all the same, young or old.
So, where are you headed?
The girl asked.
Well, the flight is headed to Doha, so...
No, man. I mean, where's your final destination?
She giggled as she responded.
My final destination is Nepal, if we make it.
Ha ha. Final destination reference.
You're the one who used those words.
He said with a slight grin.
Yeah, I must say I did enjoy that franchise, though.
So is it the fact that people die in exceptionally gruesome ways that you find appealing, or do you just like death?
Okay, smart guy.
She said as they both laughed.
What about you? Where is your final destination?
I'm headed to India. A friend of mine is getting married.
Wow, that's cool.
While they were talking, TJ noticed that they were almost at the front of the line. He had become quite intrigued by the girl. She had green eyes with a slight hint of blue. The contrast between her eyes and her olive skin was near perfect. Her dark hair matched her dark clothes. And yet, as dark-toned as her clothes were, she was stylish. This he concluded, in his limited knowledge and perspective as a guy who was clueless about fashion. As they got closer to the front, he was trying to figure out how to get her name and possibly her number before it was time for them to board. He knew the probability of them sitting next to one another was highly unlikely.
So, Did you notice that they made a mistake on our boarding passes? It's pretty bad.
he said.
Really? I didn't notice. What is it?
Look again, closely. You'll see it.
Taking out her boarding pass, she started looking for the mistake.
Do you see it? Zoe.
He asked with a grin on his face.
No, I can't.
She paused for a moment. Looking up and seeing his grin, she realized what he had done.
You think you're slick, don't you?
She said as she grabbed his boarding pass to see his name.
Tristan.